Welcome to another episode of the Safely Extreme cast. This is for the week of September 19th, 2021. I am, of course, Josh Bycer from Game Wisdom, and my co host from Nexus Games, Sharky.
Hello, everybody. And I'm not even going to say it this week. We all know.
What I am going to be saying is apparently, I'm not sure, with an OPS update or something screwed up on my font that I chose for the chat. Seems to be borked right now. It's like giving me like a very weird font.
Yeah, it's doing the same thing on my side, too.
Yeah, that is not good. I don't know what's going on with that. Well, we'll have to either readjust or keep it like this for right now. But let's get to our show this week. We are wrapping up the middle of our Secrets of Game Dev Success series. And
the middle is the longest part.
And thankfully, we'll have, I think, maybe one or two more episodes after this in this series. And then we're going to be starting to look for more game topics or more design topics. So if you have any suggestions, let us know.
Hopefully a game series. A topic series. Because
Yep.
I really enjoyed doing the series.
So, to wrap up our Secrets series, or the middle of it, we're going to be talking about, well, two very important aspects. How to prepare your studio for success, and how to mitigate failure as well. Both aspects are very much about future-proofing yourself as a game company. And as we said at the start of the series, that this is meant for people who are interested in doing game dev full-time. So if you're looking at this just from a hobbyist point of view, something you're going to do, once in a while, you can safely or extremely safely ignore our episode today.
Don't you mean safely extreme?
But for this point, this is something that, again, as we've said over the course of the series, that a lot of what we're talking about, a lot of developers don't really think about, or they don't think about as much as they should. And future-proofing yourself is a very important aspect of running a studio.
Yep. You gotta future-proof yourself, or else you're going to not have a future.
And it is often the case where even studios that put out a really good game, that, it gets hundreds of thousands of reviews or just thousands of reviews, some cases they could get hundreds of thousands, and then we see the studio in like 5 to 6 years, they're shutting down, or they've just gone completely dark. And it's very hard, as we've seen, to kind of maintain that level of success. And we really don't see too many studios who go from one mega hit to another mega hit, or even something even bigger than their last hit.
Yeah, that is pretty rare. It does happen, but it's pretty rare because it's just I don't know. Once you, it's part getting lucky, part really knowing game design. Because, like, I don't know, some of these developers that succeed, they were not, I guess, well versed in game design. You know what I mean? Some of them were just how would you say it?
Unlucky?
I wouldn't say they purely got lucky, because, like, they did know what they were doing, kind of thing. But they didn't full well know what they were doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they were able to handle what they were doing properly, but they weren't able to replicate it because it's like this black box that they don't know what's inside. You know what I mean?
Yep. And and this goes back to, and hey Smoke, this goes back to something that we talked about in one of the earlier parts. I don't remember which part it is, but understanding why a game did well or did poorly. And a lot about future proofing is about refining yourself as a studio. It's about understanding, okay, how can we make things better? Because if you're not improving, or you're not improving in the ways that people want you to, you're not going to be succeeding. And I mean, we can look at something like, let's see, Hand of Fate being a good example. Hand of Fate was a game that it had a very interesting hook. The first game, according to Steam, got 7,470 reviews. Now, was it the best game? No, it was not. But when we got to the sequel that did improve things, it only scored 4,306 reviews. And very shortly after, or a few years after that one, the company folded. And this was a case of games that got critically well received, but again, the critics don't unfortunately pay your bills. And what we've seen again are cases of critical successes and commercial failures.
Yep. And there's something to be said for critics because a lot of critics have no idea what the hell they're talking about. Or they're just grading on the curve of everything is a 7.0 or better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that the not bad? I mean, is Josh falling into this? 7.0, not bad.
Yeah. And a lot of developers really, unfortunately, struggle when it comes to what do you do next? You've had one game come out, and this is why a lot of people will say how important it is to get one game, fully out the door, from concept to on a store page. But if you want to succeed, and more importantly, if you want to survive in today's market, you have to be thinking more than just, I release a game, I want to release another game. You need to be thinking about what does this mean from a studio point of view.
Yeah, I mean, you need to be watching the market and the trends of the market and seeing where the market is going to
Mm-hmm.
at least somewhat know where you're going to go. I got lucky and unlucky at the same time of basically predicting the future before the market even got that way.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know we were going to go all cyberpunk and all this other stuff. I just started making a cyberpunk game. It was not long before when I first one of my first talks with Josh kind of thing, when we had decided to go with the sci-fi cyberpunk kind of theming of Neon Continuum, and I hadn't even heard of Cyberpunk 2077 at that point. I hadn't heard of any of the Cyberpunk games at that point. Had you, Josh?
At what year? Or what?
When you first did the preview of Neon Continuum?
Not really. Like, it really wasn't until, what would you say, like 2018, maybe 2019, that we started to like get some cyberpunk buzz.
Yeah, it was probably about a year or two after we did that cast kind of thing. And and somehow I predicted the market.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's not the only example of that. I remember speaking to the developer of Concealed Intent. This was back in 2014. And he wanted to make a space strategy style game. And at that time, there were no other games like it. Then we heard about No Man's Sky and Star Citizen and all these other games came out, and his game, which unfortunately wasn't like at the top of the tier to begin with, just got buried.
Hmm. And that's kind of what you have to deal with. If you're going to be in that realm of where the market is going, which is where you generally want to be,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to have to be better than everybody else
Yeah.
in some way. And for that, you really, really need really, really good art aesthetics and really, really good store pages. And that's not the end all of what you need, but that's like almost like the minimum kind of thing.
Excuse me.
Because if you mess up either one of those,
Mm-hmm.
your failure is almost guaranteed at that point, and that's really sad.
Yeah. And to the Smokes question, is there a win and wait before next game? I don't think there is like a established, you release a game, you cannot release another game for 6 to 8 months kind of thing. But usually, if you're working on your next commercial product, it's going to take you time, no matter what you do.
Yeah, I mean, the ideal range for a commercial game, and we're talking about development time,
Mm-hmm.
and we're talking about basically full time as a studio, not like part time in your garage or whatever. We're talking the normal, the best times range for that is 1 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, anything less than 1 year, the game turns out undercooked. It doesn't. It seems like an incomplete game. Seems like it could have had more stuff to it. Doesn't have it. Anything more than 3 years often seems like it went into
Yeah.
mismanagement, and all kinds of other issues, kind of thing. That
Mm-hmm.
is not a 100% true fact, but it's a generality that often applies. It
Mm-hmm.
applies probably what 99% of the time.
Yeah. And there are developers who have made a living or a decent living on very small scale games. The it may be done in 6 months. We're selling it for like $3.99, $4.99, that territory. But I just don't know how viable that market is today. And
It's not really,
yeah,
because like the only way that is viable really is it in a non-commercial way, basically.
mm-hmm,
A non-real commercial where it's a solo developer that's doing a large majority of it themselves, probably like
mm-hmm,
95% plus, and they're really good at the things they do, and they're really good at min-maxing kind of thing. And even then, it's usually only enough to support them with really crappy pay.
mm-hmm,
You know, it's like, it's like I spent 6 months at this, but I could have made more working full time at McDonald's for 6 months than making this game.
mm-hmm,
But I did make money, kind of thing. And that's the kind of thing you're generally looking at there. On the better case scenarios, I wouldn't necessarily say the best case scenario, but I would say the top one, the top percents are
mm-hmm,
definitely sort of like that. So like, it's not really feasible as a commercial.
mm-hmm,
But if you're in a country where $1 US is equivalent of $20 where you're at, then full time at McDonald's pay is pretty damn good pay for you. So you can make a good living off of that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not in one of those countries, not so much.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And consumers these days are just being flooded with a lot of games. And while that may not sound like a big deal to the consumer side of things, it is a big deal for developers because it means that you are more indirectly competing with other games for people's times. And we were having a discussion before the stream regarding one of the developers we've spoken to and how his studio is being scuttled at the moment because they try to do their own take on multiplayer gameplay. And while multiplayer games certainly sell, they also try to doing it during the height of the Fortnite, PUBG, Battle Royale, takeover of that market. And it didn't work out well for them. And the problem, as we've said many times over, is that people want quality experiences. They
Yep.
want to enjoy a game. I know that's a very shocking statement right there. But if you have to choose between a product that is $10 and is just okay but has a lot of bugs in it, or $20 and it's an amazing experience with like next to no bugs or issues,
But you can spend over twice as much time in probably.
yeah,
Or
which one would
rather,
you do?
not because you can spend twice as much time in it because it's twice as long. You can spend twice as much time in it because you'll play twice as long.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Would
because you
you?
don't have to deal with the bugs. You don't have to deal with these issues.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to deal with lower quality art. Would you? It's I've said this many times, and I'm going to repeat it here
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't matter how long your game is. What matters is how long people play it for, because that is the end is the length of your game. So if a
Yep.
person is only going to play your game for 10 minutes kind of thing, then you have a 10-minute long game. I don't care if somebody could potentially go to
Mm-hmm.
5 billion hours, you got a 10-minute game, sir.
Yep. And
And if your game is, you know, 5 hours long and people play to the 3 hour point, then you have a 3 hour long game. And
mm-hmm.
would you rather pay consumers would rather pay $20 for a 3 hour game than $10 for a 10-minute game.
Yeah.
And
And
we're talking about, again, how long they play it, not how long the actual total length of what
yeah.
they could potentially play.
And we should also point out we all also aren't talking about critics who are paid or they have an obligation to play a game all the way through. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again, with titles like Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, uh, so many Amnesia Rebirth I didn't like, that yes, the critic will sit and play a game for 15, 20, 30 hours. That doesn't mean the consumer is going to do that. And when we look at on completion critiques, my show that I do on Tuesdays, there are games where people will play a game that's maybe 20 hours long. They will play for 10 minutes and that's it. It is as quick as load it up, move a character, go, uninstall, refund, and you'll never see them again.
Yep.
And this is something, again, that a lot of developers, even those that I think are successful, tend to fail to realize that pain points are very real. We were playing that skateboard game on stream the other day, and there are so many, like, not like innocuous pain points, but just in your face issues that we ran into in what, 10 minutes of playing that game?
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that as a developer, you're not going to hear from those people. You're not going to hear from the people who load up your game and go, I don't like this, and stop playing it. You're
But
either
you
going,
might. They
eh,
might leave a review.
eh. But majority, you're going to hear from the extremes. The I love this game, I get to skate a bird 10 out of 10 group, or the this game is a piece of trash group. I never want to see this game ever again on my Steam library.
Which
And
some
like,
of those people might be in that 10-minute group.
yeah. But the problem, and getting back to this point about future proofing yourself, is that you need to learn your mistakes. And if you don't learn them, you're going to keep repeating them. And more often than not, each time you repeat your mistakes, fewer and fewer people are going to be willing to give you money for it. Because again, it goes back to that question. Like, let's take Disco Elysium. Would you rather spend $30 on Disco Elysium, a Game of the Year award-winning title that, people describe it as redefining, narrative design in video games? Or do you want to spend $10 on some random, very basic looking Twine game that you find on Steam with like a, 5-line title as its name?
Yeah. I think I'll take the Twine game. Just kidding.
And to Smoke's comment, are we having more games leading? I think part of that has to do with trying to appeal to larger markets. And we are seeing, again, that the wider you can cast that net, the greater the chance your game has of reaching more people, and ergo getting more sales. Because, like, the thing is, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, I'm going to make a super niche-driven game that is going to, be like this focus in terms of an audience, but I also want this game to sell 5 million copies. It's not going to happen.
It's your Dark Souls.
Mm-hmm. And even Dark Souls has been trying to become more approachable with its UX. And I'm curious to see what they're going to do with Elden Ring.
But like the thing is your target audience. The bigger your target audience is, the more potential sales you can get.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing. A lot of people say that you're, dumbing down the game or making it for just casuals, and it's like, often point, that's never the case. Often point, it's you're taking a game that you already intended to make, and now you're being like, okay, well, what would be the problems? The more casual audience would have problems with.
Mm-hmm.
Are they're going to have problems with our tutorial because our tutorial really sucks. Well, let's put a better tutorial in there, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're also going to have problems with it takes 15 clicks to do this one thing. Well, let's fix that and make it where it's only 2 clicks to now do that one thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have problems with this. Let's address that kind of thing. And they're streamlining things to make it where casual people will no longer hit nowhere near as many walls when they're playing it.
Mm-hmm.
Is this part, do we have a really high, what's it called?
Spike?
Difficulty spike, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right here. Well, let's solve that. Let's smash the spike and smooth it out more, and make it less spiky, and so that casual people can and everybody can have a smoother, better experience, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And with that, you're widening that net without actually changing the game that you're going to make. You're just making the game that you're going to make a better, more accessible, friendlier, better game.
Mm-hmm. And again, like, people will misconstrue difficulty as part of the greatness of your title. It's how we get, La Mulana games, Or even stuff like people saying that Spelunky 2 was perfect and, it did nothing wrong. But
Like
again,
Hitler.
but the problem when it comes to streamlining your game is that it requires you to understand that you messed up in some aspect of your game. And a lot of developers, again, don't like being told that they messed up in some way, shape, or form. Even if their game sold well, even if it did manage to break even or earn a profit, it doesn't matter if there are a bunch of pain points that you missed on. And like we've said, when it comes to kind of future proofing yourself in this aspect, pain points aren't hard to spot. They are very easy once you know how to approach a game from a UI or a UX standpoint.
Well, I wouldn't say they're easy to spot. They're easy for somebody like you to spot.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard for a developer that has been working on the game for 3 years straight to see literally anything because they're so zoomed in and see things on a granular level, and you can miss the most obvious of stuff, which is retarded. When you think about it, it's like when you're developing a game, the I guess the way I would describe it is, imagine if you zoomed in on a screenshot of a game to where like you could only see like 5 pixels on the screen, or
Mm-hmm.
4 pixels. And you can see that in absolutely high quality. You know everything about every one of those pixels kind of thing. And then when you're so focused like that, you missed everything around it kind of thing. And it kind of sucks, but that's what happens to developers as they're developing the game. They get this you know they get too close to the game to where they can't see properly.
Blind spots. And
I wouldn't
it,
say blind spots. They're just, they're they're so used to it. Just like how testers can get used to, problems, the developers get used to problems, and then it's not a problem anymore,
mm-hmm. Yep.
kind of thing. And all kinds of things like that. Just, all kinds of issues from getting too close from your game. And as far as I know, there's no way to avoid it.
Nope.
It's
And this
hard.
is why you need to bring in outside playtesters and have somebody, give your game a really detailed critique on it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, and we often see that difference between the games that do get those critiques and those outside playtesters versus the ones who don't. Because again, like, even though it's very hard to spot these things if you don't know what you're doing, consumers know when a game pisses them off. They're going to know very quickly, I don't want to play this game. And again, you're always going to get drop off. I'm going to have to get up in a second and try and fix my lens flare window there. But you're always going to get people who are going to quit your game no matter what. And again, there is no goal, there's no such thing as a 100% perfectly retention in a video game. But the point that you
Yeah.
want to do is you want to make your game as appealing as possible. You want to make sure that, if somebody hates platforming and they buy your platformer, you're not going to convince them to stay around. But if somebody is looking for a new platformer, they buy your game, you want them to have an enjoyable time. You don't want them to load it up and go, "This is horrible. I can't control my character at all. I'm refunding this game."
Yeah. I think I know what you need to do, Josh. You
Mm-hmm.
need to buy a prism and put it right there over at the corner of your thing,
Mm-hmm.
so that when this happens, the lens flare turns into a rainbow background behind you.
There we go. The game design rainbow.
But on like the path to success and everything,
Mm-hmm.
there there's the, hedging your bets. This is where you don't bet everything on any single thing. You
Mm-hmm.
need to you know, make sure that your core gameplay loop is good, get it tested and everything. And once that's good, kind of thing, then you're no longer betting on it. So now you can bet on something else. And you need to resolve these bets as quickly as possible so that
Mm-hmm.
you're not just like putting all your bets in. You don't want to go all in.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even want to go all in on that game because you want, if that game fails, kind of thing, that you can make another game afterwards. I know I had that problem with the last game because I put everything down on the last game. And when it failed, kind of thing, that pretty much killed the studio, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But because of sheer stubbornness and strong will, and because I have somehow been able to get far more money than ever thought possible, partly because of Corona
Mm-hmm.
checks, that I was able to start funding another game and continue funding it. And I don't think you can count on Corona checks for luck forever,
Mm-hmm.
like, but like that was part of what allowed me to, you know, back out of that horrible situation I had gotten into. And so, always hedge your bets. Don't go all in on anything.
Mm-hmm. And this is why, for a lot of developers, that we see like the whole YOLO. That after they've had one decent game, they try to go even bigger with their next game. You
Mm.
need to understand not only just what the market is, but also what you're capable of doing. And there is no shame in focusing on small games when you're starting out. Your first game shouldn't be trying to take on No Man's Sky or Star Citizen. And you need to be able to consider, again, if this game fails, am I out of a livelihood? Am I done? And it's a tough question for a lot of people to answer. And again, part of this is the passion of the game industry that, you're going to do it at, below minimum wage because you want to make this game. And if it succeeds, well, it's like, having your big break in Hollywood. But the studios that have managed to survive, and when we say survive, we're not talking about releasing one game every 10 years. We're talking about studios who can consistently put out great products that will earn back their production costs, and they keep the lights on in the studio. So,
When we talk about production costs, what we're talking about includes paying yourself at a
mhm.
reasonable pay rate.
And
We're not
any
talking about
employees.
McDonald's pays. We're talking about, $20 an hour plus kind of thing, or somewhere around in that place. At least at minimum $12 an hour.
Hmm.
And paying your employees.
Yeah. And one of the problems that we've seen with developers when it comes to hedging your bets like this is that they're not really thinking about what their next game is going to be. Now, while you're working on game number one, should you be designing game number two? No, but you should.
Maybe. It depends.
Yeah.
What I do is I have, several notepad files, and if an idea or inspiration hits me, I write it down right that second.
Hmm.
Just write straight to the pad and write it down. And if things continue to hit me, then I continue to write down. If they don't, then I don't. And just anytime something hits me, I go write it down. And whenever we go to make a new game, kind of thing, I go and look at all those different notes and everything
Hmm.
that I wrote down, and what do we want to go with, kind of thing, and what do we, maybe none of these are actually what we want to go with. Maybe we want to go with something else,
Hmm.
and we go from there, But like, potentially you are designing your game while you're working on another game, because like when I'm working on my game, when I'm working on a game, I work on something and it's like, this is really cool, but what would be even cooler is if it went like this. Oh crap. Write it down.
Mm-hmm. But you need to have a future plan. You don't want to just think about your studios. I'm just going to make one game, and that's going to fund myself for the next 20 years. It is very rare for one game to do that well. We're talking AI Wars 1, Minecraft, Factorio, and those are more of the exceptions to these rules. More often than not, as we've said, your first game will probably fail. Your second game could fail as well. What were you about to say? Oh, I think we're losing Shark. Mm-mm. Your voice is being distorted. Mm-mm. Oh, I think Shark's.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. All right. So, what were you about to say?
I wouldn't say anything.
Okay.
That was just my audio problems.
But when you're trying to think about your games along these lines, you have to be considering what can you reasonably do for your next game. And this is why we've said on many of our previous episodes that once you've kind of found your genre, whether it's an action or abstracted based design, you typically want to stick with that and grow in that area. You shouldn't go from making a first person shooter to a turn based RPG, then go from a turn based RPG to super high stakes 3D action game.
I would put an exception to that.
Mm.
When you do a gray area game, you could go from a first person shooter to a turn based RPG if you're doing Valkyria Chronicles.
Mm.
And
so more like mixing genres then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you would really need to know turn based games as well as your first person shooters.
Mm-hmm.
I would more argue that it would go the other way around for Valkyria Chronicles, because Valkyria Chronicles is more turn based first and first person shooter second. So I would more say they're going from turn based to first person in that case, but they're not totally leaving behind the turn based, and they cannot do either without significant amount of knowledge. And also, if you're doing a dual genre game kind of thing, it better not be your first game. It better not be you better have I think you need a commercial success on the books at a minimum before you attempt doing that, because there's just so much that goes into combining genres, and you really need to know not only the games and how to design for them, but you need to know the consumer base. And to really truly know the consumer base, you have to have a successful game.
And if you don't have that, you're not really, again, starting from your best foot. And it's just very hard as you're trying to build your next game or build something experimental. Again, it's why research is a very big point about this. Without understanding what people expect from a game or expect from a genre, you don't, like, a big part about planning for future success is understanding what the market wants. Now, again, if you're making something completely new and original, or at least experimenting in certain aspects, you can't get 100%. But like we've said, if you're building a platformer, or you're building an RPG, or you're building a deck builder, I expect you to know what people like and dislike about those genres. Because if you don't, then how are you supposed to make one that's going to appeal to those specific groups?
Mm-hmm.
You're not. And we've
Nope.
seen plenty of games that have said, oh, we're going to combine, gotcha design with action games, with visual novels. And we often end up with a game that is a worse example of all three of those genres. And you
Yep.
don't want that. Like again, like if you're mixing genres, you're not going to get the extreme fans of either genre. That's just not going to happen. But you want to get the people who are at least somewhat interested in them. Hmm. And that's
Well,
a
number one, the first thing you got to realize, nobody's going to steal your game design ideas because game design ideas aren't worth anything, basically. Well, I wouldn't say nobody's going to steal them, but I mean, the people who steal them, I mean, it doesn't really matter because the fact is if I said my game idea was to make a grid-based CCG with sci-fi theme kind of thing, there is 10 billion ways you could build that game. 10 billion ways that the mechanics could go, 10 billion
mm-hmm,
ways the theming could go, and you could give that we could do a game jam around that and have like 100 people, 1,000 people, 2,000, even 20,000 people
mm-hmm,
take that thing and they have to make exactly that.
mm-hmm.
And every one of them, there would probably be like almost nothing similar between any of those games.
It would be like telling like 50 different car builders, build me a car that the only condition is it's red. You're going to get 50 completely different ideas of what a red car looks like. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the beauty and the nightmare about game design is that, again, you can tell somebody, build me a platformer. We'll get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different platformers. But how many of those are going to be good platformers?
Not the
That's
ones
going to
that
be a.
are generic that
Mm-hmm,
use physics and all this other stuff use you know and all that. It's going to ruin it. Not these ones with bad controls.
mm-hmm. When the
A
jumping
lot of them
feels
are not
bad.
going to be good.
Yep.
Not ones with static jumps and very limited amount of abilities.
Mm-hmm.
But a few select ones of them will look and be amazing.
Yeah. And to the follow up, they are different, very subtle aspects. And like one of the things, as we've said, is that implementation is king when it comes to game design.
Mm,
Outside of you literally just taking somebody else's IP, which you shouldn't do. Again, there's a reason why I don't cover a lot of like fan games and stuff like that here on the channel, because fan games don't have a long lifespan, unfortunately. You can make the best damn Metroid. It doesn't matter when Nintendo's lawyers come down upon you.
yep.
But the implementation, though, is what is often what defines these games. That if you can make a look at Fortnite, for instance, Fortnite versus PUBG. When Fortnite blew up, they basically made a better PUBG, and it worked really well for them. And again, this is why it's hard to compete in spaces when there is that 800-pound gorilla. Because how many developers today could, on day one, release a game that is better than Fortnite? Just like
Yeah.
how many developers could have released day one a better game than World of Warcraft, circa 2007, 2008? How many could do it with FTL or Darkest Dungeon or Celeste or anything like that? And in a lot of cases, you can't. And this is why you need to look at how to be different. How can you, if you want to make a Mario like platformer, how can you be different from Mario? Not
Now I tell
necessarily.
you,
Yep, go ahead.
what you should be scared of. You shouldn't be scared of people stealing your ideas. What you should be scared of is people stealing your game design documents, because that has a lot of how you're going to implement things,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to have a lot of details. And from that, they could create the exact same game and then change a few things to make it better or different, or or just beat you to market with it,
Mm-hmm.
and could absolutely destroy you, kind of thing. That assuming that you were going to be successful in the first place, because I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's also a big caveat that most of the time, these commercial games that are released aren't successful. So even if somebody did 100% steal your game design document, kind of thing, they could just fail in the same way you were going to fail.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So like it's you know there's no reason to steal ideas. There's
And
an idea isn't really much anyway, because like an idea, as I some people say, that ideas are worthless, execution is key. I would say ideas are worth something, but they're not worth anything monetarily. But execution is absolutely king, and execution definitely comes in when you're talking about game design document,
it.
the art of your game, the UI, the
Mm-hmm.
UX, the overall game design, which is in your game design document, all that stuff is definitely in the execution. That's the reason why you should worry about people stealing your finished art assets and your finished game design documents, your finished code base,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. Absolutely do worry about people stealing that. I haven't really heard very many cases of that being stolen, if any. But
Mm-hmm.
the worrying about people stealing your idea, there's nothing to worry about there. Like I can like I spew out game ideas all the time
Mm-hmm.
live on stream when Josh is playing games. It's like, if anybody wants to have it, go for it, kind of thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because even if I were to make something like that and somebody else were to steal my idea and do it before them, I'm confident with the no sound. That's
Uh-oh.
no sound.
Uh-oh. Who's
It's
been
showing
quiet this whole time?
everything. Oh, crap.
Uh-oh.
Why is OBS doing that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, and again, while Shark is fixing that, like, implementation is ultimately going to be the biggest factor. And,
Test,
like,
test.
yep, I
Okay,
can
there
hear
we
you.
go.
Like, there was this whole minor controversy regarding what was it, a Donut Country? This was a indie game that, let me see, was it called Donut Country? Yeah, Donut Country. That somebody, a mobile developer, made like a multiplayer, completely like match-based version using a similar look to it. And the developers were worried that people weren't going to buy his game, that they stole his idea. But the problem is that, again, that at the basic level, you can't copyright or trademark or infringe on mechanics. Because Nintendo made Mario means nobody else can make a platformer. You can, of course, infringe on IPs. Putting a, I don't know,
Mario.
yeah, putting Mario in a game, putting the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in a game without, and then trying to sell it. But when you're trying to create an idea for a game, it really comes down to, or trying to create a successful game, it really comes down to just, what can you do with it? And this is why you can have 10 different platformers or 10 different deck builders or whatever, and they'll be completely different games of completely different qualities.
Oh,
And
I've got an idea. All right, check out this game idea. I'm going to make it. This is my game idea. It's a platformer where you jump around with a decent bit of speed, but not like a whole lot. It also stars a character that is a anthropomorphic animal kind of thing, and you go around and collect a bunch of things that will maybe give you extra lives, or maybe nothing kind of thing. Let's make that game. I mean, how many thousands of games did I just 100% nail with that idea? I mean, that idea is like a ton of games.
You just gotta go fast.
Yeah. And I mean that's Mario, that's Sonic, that's Banjo and Kazooie, that's
Don't forget the greatest platformer, Bubsy.
Crash. Yeah, that's Bubsy. That's
How many?
what's some other games that is?
How many people watching this actually know who Bubsy is? I am really dating myself.
Or the train wreck that Bubsy was. I mean, there was a Bubsy remake recently.
Oh, I know. How many people know Gex? There we go. But as a quick time...
That idea would be all those games, and the difference between those games on that idea is how they executed on them.
Yep. One platformer, one RPG, one strategy game can be completely different. Look at Age of Empires. The differences from what we see between Age of Empires 2 to what we're playing with Age of Empires 4. They're both real-time strategy games. They both involve always be villagering, but they are different at the fundamental level. But again, the important caveat, we're talking about franchises. Like, we're talking about, multi-million-dollar names and franchises like being built like that. And for most indie devs, and I'm sure for most of you watching this, you don't have a multi-million-dollar IP in your back pocket.
No, I might, but
and
as for sharing your devlogs and stuff, you don't need to make devlogs. You can if you want to. You don't need to. It's not a key part of marketing or anything like that. Sharing screenshots, getting feedback is important. You definitely need to get feedback, and sharing a screenshot. I mean, what's somebody going to steal from that besides like dissect it and steal some of your art? I mean, but like, number one, you'd have to have a really good art for them to even want to do that, and number two, most people aren't going to do it. Most, I mean, like, if somebody shows me a screenshot of something really pretty, I might download it and use it for reference, because it's like, I really like that. What can I create that can take the parts that I like from that and use them in my own art, kind of thing.
There are going to be people, we've seen companies who will rip off a game. Instead of it's called Hades, it's called, I don't know, Haters or Hades.
Chinese ripoff.
Yeah, and
we're mostly the games you're referring to are the games made in China, and at that point, stealing games and all that stuff, they're not going to steal stuff while you're still working on it. They're going to steal it after you get done with it.
Yeah, and
so there's nothing you can do about it other than take a flight over to China, find the person who did it, and do something very illegal over there. And good luck making it out of China after you do that. Good luck making it out of China, period, after getting over there, because China's China.
As a quick time check, we are hitting an hour. Do you want to spend maybe another 15 minutes talking about preparing for failure and then wrap things up?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get to the second point, or we'll spend a little bit more focus on this, and that is preparing for failure. Because you are going to fail at some point at a game company. Whether it is because your game because your game is not good. Maybe you failed on marketing. Maybe you failed because you released your game the same day that Call of Duty came out.
Maybe
Something.
your game failed because Steam decided to throw a surprise Steam sale right before you
Mhm.
released
When do you
and
think
didn't
this?
tell anybody about it.
Uh, you should be at the point that the screenshots are as best as they can be
I
because.
would say it depends because it depends on if you're doing hard marketing or soft marketing,
Mhm.
which depends on where you're sharing it at. If you're sharing it at places where people will be biased towards you, aka your own Discord, you
Mhm.
know, on a Discord where you're friends with people, on a game developer site where game developers are helping game developers on your personal YouTube channel, things like that are all soft marketing,
Mhm.
and you share it as soon as possible,
Yeah.
basically, and get feedback on it. Now, when you're talking about hard marketing, you're talking about like any place where anybody that cares absolutely nothing about you can see it. We're talking about Twitter, Facebook, Reddit,
A Steam store
um,
page.
yeah, the Steam store page, you know, like number of other places, any of those places, you should not be showing your stuff until you have the most polished,
Mhm.
finished version of your stuff. And you shouldn't even be showing that until you're in your hard marketing phase in the last,
Mhm.
probably 6 months of development. And that should be part of your hard marketing campaign
Yeah.
leading up to release.
And as another very important pro tip, if you're doing hard marketing, there should be no temp art. There should be
No.
no placeholder art in anything that you show. There shouldn't be, uh, version alpha 0.007 in the corner or, Bandicam, screenshot at the top. Like,
Nope.
when you're doing your hard marketing,
It should
this
be
is,
all professional.
yeah, this is the professional time.
Yep.
And,
And so the best time to do soft marketing is all the time. The best time to do hard marketing is 6 months before release, roughly. It depends on the game because,
mhm.
could be shorter, could be longer, but roughly 6 months. And after release.
Yeah. I actually got a bit of a challenge for you.
Hmm.
What when do we consider this for Kickstarter campaigns? Because I actually have a friend who's preparing a Kickstarter for a game that's coming, or he's doing a Kickstarter in like the coming month or so. Like, if you're talking about like Kickstarter project, how does that timeline change, or does it change at all?
That's a hard one because it all depends on how you're doing your Kickstarter. You know, I'm not a Kickstarter expert, so take this all with a grain of salt. If you're going to do like a lot of Kickstarters do, and that's use Kickstarter for marketing kind of thing, you want to do that's when you're doing your Kickstarter during that last 6-ish months when you're doing your hard marketing, and it'll be an extra bit of funnel for your thing to amplify all your other resources kind of thing. you know and if you're in the hard marketing phase and you're only putting out hard marketing. Now, if you're doing it the other popular way of this game is nowhere near done and we don't have money to finish it kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
Kickstarter probably isn't going to be able to give you enough money to finish it,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest. But like, let's just say you're going that route kind of thing, then you would probably have to do a short phase of hard marketing that is just hard marketing your Kickstarter, not your game itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're promoting, you know, come support our Kickstarter over here. And when you, but that's going to be very hard because if you don't already have a Discord community built up,
Hmm.
if you don't already have, a a YouTube channel built up, if you don't have
Hmm.
community bases built up at that point, which through your self marketing, which you probably haven't done at this point, then you're pretty much guaranteed to fail because according to what I seen the other day from one of the top people at Kickstarter kind of thing, she said that basically 30% of the funds come from Kickstarter, from people on Kickstarter. The
Hmm.
other like 70% come from the community you've already established.
Yep.
So if you have not established a big community at that point and a big enough community to actually 70% fund yourself, then going to Kickstarter probably ain't going to do you any good.
Yep. It's the same thing that I've learned the hard way with Patreon. I've had a Patreon for about 6 years now, and it hasn't really grown because, for one thing, like being on Patreon, just like being on Kickstarter, doesn't magically grant you money. Just like putting your game on Steam doesn't magically guarantee it's going to be a success. You have to do the work outside of that. And this is again why it's important to factor in failure. You need to be thinking, what is the worst possible scenario? Could it be, my game doesn't do well, so we'll move on to a next one? Could it be, I'm now going to be homeless because I can't pay my mortgage? You have to be very attentive as to the highs and lows of your game. And for a lot of studios out there, they're not really thinking about that because eventually the money is going to stop. There's only so many people who will buy Factorio or Minecraft or spend money in Fortnite or anything along those lines. And you need to consider what's going to be next and can you succeed even if it fails.
Yeah. Here's an interesting thought I just had.
Hmm.
If 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 what she said is right about only 30% come from the Kickstarter audience and 70% comes from your own audience.
Hmm.
Well, when you pay all the Kickstarter percentages and everything else, I believe you lose like 50% of your money. So, I mean, in theory, you would gain more money by not going to Kickstarter and just starting a PayPal and saying, "Hey, my community, donate so I can make this game." And in theory, you would have 20% more money than what you would for Kickstarter, and you wouldn't have to pay for the rewards.
Or I've heard
So,
people like Indiegogo, although I don't know what their rates are compared to Kickstarter.
Indiegogo, I believe they bid for ownership of the company,
Uh,
stocks, basically.
hmm.
So,
Yeah.
they're giving you ownership of the company.
Hmm.
So they get, it's a rev share of sorts.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, but like yeah, like it when you're using Kickstarter as a marketing tool though, in that last few weeks, few months
Hmm.
of time kind of thing, I think that while you're only going to get like, you're going to be losing such a big percentage kind of thing from your
Hmm.
community and everything. What I think what you gain is a snowball magnification effect, to where,
Hmm.
like say you're running ads on YouTube, you have your Steam page, you have your other media outlets kind of thing. And all of those are kind of, each kind of bringing their own piece kind of thing. But then when you have Kickstarter, that's a whole nother piece that then Kickstarter can magnify this one, that can magnify this one, that can magnify this one. So Kickstarter can magnify the three that would then all three magnify Kickstarter kind of thing.
Hmm.
So it could exceed what you could naturally raise at 70% of whatever you had. Because basically in a sense, it's like when a YouTube channel does a collab with another YouTube channel kind of thing, then those two YouTube channels normally build up each other kind of thing. Because
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, if YouTube creator A normally gets 1,000, let's say 10,000 views on their videos, and YouTuber B gets normally 15,000, then what you'll probably see is YouTuber B is going to get now 20 or 25,000, and YouTuber A is going to get now 20 or 25,000 kind of thing, because they're they're not taking views from each other. They're rather adding to each other kind of thing. And when you add a whole new source to that, think about it, the more sources you have,
Mm-hmm.
the more those sources are going to add into the other sources, which is going to then have all those sources add back into it.
Yeah, and since we kind of got a little bit off topic there, w- like when you're trying to build everything up around your studio like this and factoring in failure in that aspect, you have to again be considering just what is your plan B? And I remember when I spoke with Chris Parr from Arkin about this, and he's been very candid about how many failures Arkin Games has had following AI Wars. And I think part of his problem, and part of the problem that I see a lot of developers get into, is that they don't want to. Either they don't want to, or they can't, improve on why something is failing. Like when I looked at the games, like when I looked at Arkin's track record following AI Wars 1, there are issues with each and every one of those games that instead of trying to rectify or improve on, they just try to do something else completely different and then create a whole new share of issues. And like going back to the first part of this week's show, you have, if you want to prepare for success and mitigate any failures, you have to understand why something is not working. You can't just bang your head against a wall and hope that the wall is going to break down at some point. And a lot of people, when it comes to understanding their own designs, tend to slip up on that factor. It's why, again, that for somebody like me, I can look at a game that you spent 5 to 10 years of your life designing and spot just about every one of your UI and UX issues within 30 seconds of starting that game up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you also have to realize that when you're releasing a commercial game, the first commercial game is pretty much guaranteed to fail. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much written in stone. And you pretty much don't want it to not be written in stone. You kind of want to fail on your first game. And here's the reason why. When you don't fail on your first game, you fail to learn the reasons why your game was not good, which leads to the problem you just were talking about with them just continuing adding stuff rather than fixing stuff that was messed up. Yep. And, and when you go down that path kind of thing, you're going down the path of death. It is, most of them don't get to make a third or fourth game kind of thing. They make the second game. It was just, the same bad parts of the first game, just with more bad parts and more good parts.
Yeah.
And more of everything. And it's just a path to failure.
And here's a very sad but truthful fact. Developers who go on Twitter or talk about, my game didn't do well, I need help, and all their developer friends will boost their game, they'll say, oh, I'm going to buy it. That doesn't mean anything to the consumer. The consumer doesn't care that you're sad that your game isn't selling well. They don't care that you spent 10 years of your life on it. And part of, again, growing as a developer is trying to fix the issues of your game. Now, if you're making like multiple different genres and you're doing complete different experimentations, you don't necessarily have that same kind of carryover from game one to game two.
Although you might in the case of Lazy Bear Games.
But again, people don't. And I think this is kind of like our mission statement, or here's like our main point for this week's show. People don't want to play bad games. They don't
even want to play alright games. They don't even play good games. They only want to play great and amazing games. And great games are pretty shit to them, to be honest. That's the truth of today's market. Just make good games kind of thing. Don't make a good game. People will absolutely rip the hell out of you. Even if it's a good game with good aesthetics kind of thing. It's not going to be good enough. It needs to be great or amazing. Now, you can make a great or amazing game that is on the low budget side, that is shorter kind of thing. There's no problem with that. But you do have to nail your art aesthetics. You do have to really make a really good game.
And I would also add, if you are going to make a short game, a 2 to 3 hour long game, don't be planning a 5 to 10 year budget for that game.
No.
And this is also why, this is one final point I want to make.
Unless it takes you 5 to 10 years to get $100, few $100 for the budget.
And this is my final point that I want to mention, and I'm going to stop talking because we'll really go over time. We keep going. Another major aspect about mitigating failure and understanding success, you need to understand project management and studio management. And I think we'll be talking about community management for our next part. Is that right, Shark?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the final part of this long series.
Yeah. So project management is, again, it's the boring parts of running a studio. It's understanding that, okay, how long would it reasonably take me to do this? And it's not just saying 6 to 10 years. It's about understanding what is actually going to be the nuts and bolts of this game and how do I put this together? Because you need to be able to understand this stuff. There are so many soft skills that are oftentimes the difference between, this isn't so much about game success and failure, but studio success and failure. Being able to manage people, being able to actually plan out a game's development. And planning game development is very, very hard.
Yeah, if you manage your studio the same way Blizzard has, you're going to be in trouble.
In maybe 6 to 10 years.
Well, probably sooner than that, seeing how you're a small indie.
Yeah. But also, if you think to yourself, oh, I'm only going to need $30,000 and 2 months to finish this game, and it turns into a 3-year project, somewhere the wires got crossed.
Well, the thing is whatever time you think the game is going to take, it's going to take a lot longer than that.
Always budget at least 2 to 3 times, I would say.
Yeah, like I know the last game, Chromasia, we like, okay, we'll spend a year on this. Took us 2.5 years.
And again, quality takes time. No one is going to be able to build a Mario competitor in 6 months. Just like you're never going to be able to compete with Slay the Spire, that I think had like a 3 or 4 year development cycle. I'm not 100% sure on that top of my head. But
however, you can make a Mario-like game, a platformer game that looks decent and performs decent in 3 days. But there's a massive difference between that 3-day version and that 3-year version.
Or that 5-year version. And you have to be able to understand just how far you can go with these game ideas. If you're trying to compete with Rocket League or Hearthstone or Mario or Hades, you need to understand that there is a market for that game, but there may not be a market for games like it. And if you think to yourself, oh, I'm just going to spend double the money and double the time that Supergiant did on Hades, and my game will turn out, twice as successful, that's not going to be happening.
Josh is firing shots at Neon Continuum now. Games like Hearthstone.
But the game industry is a very tough market. And very few of the developers, even the ones who have amazing games, survive more than 5 to 10 years. And this is why, like for myself, I don't care if you just made Auction Not Included, or if you just made Factorio or Minecraft. I want to see your entire studio's portfolio over how many years it's been out there. Because that is often going to be what tells us if a studio is going to survive long term or not. Because if all you've done is made one amazing game and 10 horrible games, you're probably not going to be surviving in the next 5 to 10 years of that.
Yep. But if you see that they have progressively made better and better games every year, or in general made better and better, and maybe all 10 of them are all right kind of thing, and then they have a big hit off success kind of thing, you're like, okay, they've been growing, they've been getting better over time. We can see that this studio is probably going to continue to get better.
Yeah. You don't want to see that the studio's getting worse. And oftentimes that's because they've had that one amazing success and they never really understood why people didn't like their game, or, they never had that massive failure. So they kept trying to chase that lightning in the bottle again and again, and it didn't work for them.
And another part is accepting feedback, because when you get that big success and everything, you're bombarded with feedback kind of thing. And at that point, you kind of have to turn a lot of it off. And when you're turning any of it off, or a big portion of it, you're probably going to turn off everything that is not, oh, this game is the greatest thing ever. And at that point, you're not accepting any feedback.
Yep. And again, feedback in this aspect, it supersedes how many copies your game sold. It supersedes how many, Game of the Year awards you got, or how many, events praise your game. Because we've seen games that have like an entire page worth of, winner of 2019 award, best concept, best art, best whatever, of all these different like little award factions, and the game still turns out, being a bad title. Because problems don't go away, even if your game succeeds.
Where the awards taste like wine.
And I guess here's my final line. At the end of the day, the game industry is a fun business, but it is still a business. And
it's also a very insanely hard business. It is the Dark Souls of businesses.
Yeah.
It is everybody who does not get good, which will be probably 99.9% of developers, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
And it's going to be the 0.1% that get good and succeed. And not even all of those succeed in a way that they make millions of dollars. Most of those just succeed enough to make their next game,
or
which
break
allows them to
even.
seed enough to make their next game, which allows them to
Mm-hmm.
seed enough to make the next game. And it's just a chain of, we're stringing along to keep on making games kind of thing, rather than we're actually making money to go bigger or better or anything
Yeah.
like that. They're just making enough money to continue.
And
Where and even smaller percentage of those is the ones that make a lot of money.
yeah. And those ones that do massively succeed, people from the outside will never understand again what they did to succeed. They'll theory craft until the cows come home. YouTubers will make dozens and dozens of reaction videos and hit pieces and whatever. But unless you actually worked at that studio, you won't even have a molecule or a percent idea of why that game worked and why another game didn't. And even
Unless you interview the developers.
yeah, and
But then
even
you'll have a
then,
small percentage.
they may not even understand why their game succeeded. We've seen that before,
Yeah.
and
But you'll certainly have a lot better
yeah,
inkling.
and this is why we're doing this series as a mission statement to try and illuminate all the potential aspects of why a game can succeed or fail.
Yeah, it's the how to succeed at game development, you know, all into a mini series put
Mm-hmm.
together to tell you how to succeed,
Yep.
or how to succeed. And
Mm-hmm.
when that comes in as how to succeed, how to, it's not like if you do all these things, you will succeed. It's if
Mm-hmm.
you don't do all these things, you're pretty much guaranteed to fail horribly.
Yep.
It's like this is a checklist to give you a chance, kind of thing,
It's like
a real chance.
it's like going into the wilderness. You can, if you won't go into the wilderness with no clothes, no tools, and just forge around, there's a chance you could survive. There's also a chance you're going to die very quickly.
And that
But
chance is almost 100%.
yeah, but if
And
you
what
go,
this series is a checklist to
Mhm.
bring your knife, bring a tent or some kind of shelter,
Bring clothes.
bring some, bring some water, bring some food.
Hmm.
Here's a book that tells you what food that you can scavenge from your area in the wilderness.
What
Here's a
berries not
book
to
of,
eat.
you know, here's a water purifier.
Hmm.
Here's a bunch of fire starting methods. Here's a whole bunch of this stuff. But even with all that, that means you have everything you technically need to survive. But will you be able to? The chances are still pretty low.
Or there's a
But
chance that you could get struck by lightning and just die right there in the wilderness.
yep. But without all these things, your death is almost imminent. And that's what this series is
Hmm.
to if you follow these things, your death is not imminent.
You
Your
have
death
a
is just
greater chance.
yeah. You have all these tools at your disposal that now you can go forward and at least have a fighting chance. It's not a
Hmm.
good fighting chance because you go out in the wilderness, you encounter a bear or a pack of wolves. These tools, more than likely, you're going to die.
The Wolf Among
But
Us.
you might not. Yeah, the wolf among us.
Yeah.
But these tools will give you a fighting chance to
Hmm.
help you succeed at game development. So, you
Yeah.
know, doing these things will not make you succeed at game development, but it'll give you a fighting chance where not doing them will almost guarantee your death.
Yeah. And again, we've seen developers who don't do all this stuff and they succeed. Just as we've seen developers who do all this stuff and they end up failing.
Mm-hmm.
It unfortunately is the gamble of what it means for game development. You can have your
But
game fail and then one day you get the Among Us success.
yeah, but the ones we've seen succeed often have that one success and then they die right after.
Yeah. What we want and what you should be striving for is consistent successes. So it's not just, 10 out of 10, 2 out of 10, 5 out of 10. What we would like to see is maybe, 9 out of 10, 8.8 out of 10, 9.2 out of 10. We want to see that you are able to consistently do great games. Because that's how you build company trust. That's how you build branding. And it's why people really care about the next Nintendo game, or the next game from Clay Entertainment, or they used to care about the next Blizzard game. Because
They still do.
just in a different way, I think, right now.
Well, I mean, some people just
Mm-hmm.
still care about it in the same way because they don't
Mm-hmm.
inform themselves
Yeah. But the
or care.
point is that there's a reason why we say that success breeds success and why failure breeds failure. If you keep doing things right, you're going to keep improving and you're going to keep growing. If you do things wrong, you're going to keep making mistakes, you're going to start shrinking your audience. And then suddenly, the game that you expected to sell, let's say 80,000 copies, you may get 20. You may get 5. And you're going to be left there scratching your head wondering, well, why is my game not selling? I just did the same exact thing on my last game.
And I want to go back to our analogy here with the, going out into the middle of the woods. With, you go out into the middle of the woods with all these tools and you fell, you die kind of thing. But you die, like 5 days in kind of thing. And you think about it and you get all this feedback and you figure out what caused me to die? What points did I steer wrong? So that the next time on your next life, when you go out there on your next game, you have that extra knowledge there that will help you survive longer.
Wait,
and
so
better.
is real life just a roguelike?
Well, game development is a roguelike.
Oh, okay.
Because game development, you have multiple games. As long as you can keep the studio doors open, you will have multiple games that will go out there and go through the roguelike.
Yeah. Do you have 7 days to die?
Yeah.
All right. But let's end things here for our show this week. I think that's a great point. So, again, as a preview for our next episode, we're going to be talking about community management. All the fun parts of interacting with your consumer base or not interacting with them. So be sure to tune into that. We'll be doing that show next Sunday. Hopefully Shark isn't too quiet. I may have to adjust Shark's volume as well when I do the editing. But be sure to tune into that next Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to catch our show in the inquiries, we'll be reviewing Steam store pages. We will be doing that Mondays at 4 p.m.
Yep. And be sure to lick the smash button, smash the link button on both Josh's and my channel. And also, join my Discord. I'm making a game right now, Neon Continuum. It's a grid-based CCG that is based around sci-fi, particularly, a good bit of cyberpunk in there. And it's going to be a really cool game. And if you join the Discord, you can come and play it once a month at the monthly dev chats, as well as more often in surprise doses. But links to everything, my channel, Josh's channel, my Discord, Josh's Discord, all the links are down in the description of both Josh's video and my video. And I don't know if you have this in your video or not, Josh, but I know I have all the links to the previous parts of the series of this How to Succeed at Game Dev.
In the recordings, yes. In the live shows, no.
Okay, I have it in both.
All right. So, with that said, come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where is in the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.
See ya.